after fighting with the storms, winds, and water for 3 consecutive weeks. Finally, on May 10, 1916, they set foot on the South Georgia Island. The same island from which they had set out on their journey to Antarctica 522 days ago. A wave of happiness ran through them. Shackleton and the crew members hugged each other. But this wasn't the end of their struggles. Actually, friends, the South Georgia Island is more than 100 kilometers long. The beach they had landed on was on the other side of the human settlement. Let's find the place where they landed on the map. The human settlement and the whaling station were exactly on the opposite side of this island. They were now faced with 2 ways to get to the whaling station. First, getting back on the boat and traveling 130 miles by sea to get to the north of the island. And the second option was to walk to the north of the island. They had to walk only 29 miles. But the problem was that there are such dangerous mountains on South Georgia Island that no person in history had been able to cross this island on foot. It was considered impossible to cross this island on foot. So, obviously, they chose the boat. But, of course, there was yet another problem. Their boat had been so badly damaged by the rough waves that it wasn't in a suitable condition. They had no other option than to walk. The alternative was to attempt crossing the island. The island of South Georgia had never been crossed by anybody. The whalers regarded the country as inaccessible. Shackleton was not one to give up now. Not at this point. They had endured so much over the past year, they couldn't give up now. To survive, they were now faced with a challenge no human had ever attempted before. These 10,000-foot-high snowy mountains had to be crossed somehow. Shackleton decided to first rest and build back their lost strength. So they stayed in a cave and ate for the next 9 days. Thankfully, there was no shortage of food on this island. The island was swarming with albatrosses, seals, and penguins. After resting for 9 days, on May 19, 1916, at around 3 a.m., they set off from the King Haakon Bay. He had only 2 other crew members with him, Worsley and Crean. Worsley and Crean were coming with me. And after consultation, we decided to leave sleeping bags behind, and make the journey in very light marching order. And now their first challenge was that no one knew where to go and how. The snow was up to their knees. The mountains were so high that they couldn't see beyond them. They climbed the mountains one after another, and looked for the way from the top. If they couldn't find a way, they would go back. This happened several times. They climbed as many mountains as they could see. On some mountains, they found deep gorges, and on others, walls of rock. Whenever they couldn't find a way to go ahead, they retreated and got back down, to climb another mountain. With the complete clearance of the mist, we saw, to our sharp disappointment, what we had taken for a frozen lake was an arm of the sea. Shackleton said grimly, "We shall have to go on to the next, boys." This happened 3 times. Over the next few days, they had climbed all the surrounding mountains. Even after climbing the last mountain, they couldn't find anything new. They were staring at a deep valley with a steep and dangerous slope. The situation looked grim enough. Fog had cut off our retreat. Darkness covered our advance. It was useless to continue in this fashion. By then, they couldn't retreat anymore. They tied themselves along a rope and started cutting stairs into the mountain. Literally, they made stairs to climb down the mountain. After descending for some time, they spotted the Stromness whaling station and other humans. After climbing the mountains for 36 hours. On May 20, 1916, Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean successfully crossed the Allardyce mountain range and reached the Stromness whaling station. It was the first time in history that someone had crossed the South Georgia Island on foot. The level of impossible feat they achieved can be understood by after Shackleton. This was done only in 1955. By expert climbers with full preparation. Shackleton had neither tents nor sleeping bags. They had courage, determination, and a strong will. When Shackleton and his companions finally reached the whaling station, it was difficult to identify whether they were humans. Their beards had grown too long. Their faces were dark. with only their eyes visible. Their clothes were all torn. Eventually, the factory manager at the station recognized them and identified him as Shackleton, the guy who had gone missing with his team in Antarctica 2 years ago. Every person at the South Georgia station knew Shackleton and his crew's story. Everyone knew about it as a painful incident. The man who died with his ship. They couldn't believe that the same man was standing in front of them 2 years later. The factory manager gave them food and new clothes immediately, and a bed to sleep in. The three bathed and shaved. And the next day, Worsley arrived at King Haakon in a boat to rescue their 3 other companions. The 3 people who were still waiting for Shackleton on the other side of the island. But Shackleton's real concern now was the 22 crew members stranded on Elephant Island. It had been more than a month since they last saw them. Were they still alive? In such dire situation, would you be able to remain motivated enough to survive? Especially when you don't even know if your captains could successfully cross Drake's Passage or not. On the other hand, will anyone come to rescue you or not? Tell me the truth in the comments below. How long will you be able to survive like this? Shackleton tried his best to rescue them from Elephant Island as soon as possible. But when he reached there with another ship, once again, the rescue ship got stuck in the ice. He tried again, but it didn't work. The same thing happened the 3rd time. In 3 months, he tried thrice to go to Elephant Island to rescue them. But he had to turn back his ship all 3 times. As time passed, Shackleton's kept getting more and more worried. He specially requested the British government to give him an ice-breaking ship. He was given a ship called Discovery, but it would have taken some more weeks to arrive. Shackleton was in no mood to wait. He didn't know how long would they be able to hold out. Another ship was requested from the Chilean government. He was given a ship named Yelcho. On August 25, 1916, he left for Elephant Island again aboard this ship. It took him about 6 days, but this time, he reached Elephant Island successfully on August 30th. He was shocked by what he saw when he reached the island. Actually, these 22 people who remained on Elephant Island, Shackleton knew that they would need leadership. Or else, they would get depressed and frustrated. So, Shackleton made one of them, Frank Wild, the leader. After Shackleton left, on Frank Wild's orders, they built a shelter by turning over the 2 boats. They remained there for 128 days. They used to hunt penguins and seals to feed themselves. Amidst the cold, hunger, and disappointment, Frank Wild repeated the same thing every morning. Pack your bags, friends. The boss can come today. Boss referred to Shackleton. But the boss didn't come. Days changed into weeks and weeks into months. But every morning, Frank would get up and repeat the same thing. Pack your bags, friends. The boss can come today. Every morning, Frank climbed the hill to check whether a ship arrived or not. And every evening, he returned disappointed. After 4 months, people's courage was beginning to wane. Things were getting more difficult. Black Bora's leg was grossly infected. It was a gangrene infection. So they had to cut off this leg. With every passing day, they were closer to believing that Shackleton couldn't actually reach South Georgia. His boat might have sunk on the way. It had been 4 months and 6 days since Shackleton left. Frank Wild had decided to move ahead. At Frank's order, they really packed their bags. But not in the hopes of being rescued. This time, they were planning to sail. They started preparing to leave for Deception Island. But before they could leave Elephant Island, they spotted something far in the sea. A huge ship was sailing towards them. This was the ship Yelcho. Once the ship was close enough, they could see their commander and boss, Shackleton. From the man on duty outside, we heard a sudden yell. "Wild," he shouted, "Wild! There's a ship! Haven't we better light a flare?" Their boss was finally there to rescue them. Shackleton was stunned to see them. All 22 of them were alive. They hadn't given up. After fighting with ice, mountains, and oceans for almost 2 years, Shackleton and his crew returned home. When we landed, they welcomed us so heartily. that they nearly pushed us into the sea again. It was truly miraculous. Shackleton left with 27 people and returned with all 27 people. It was possible only because of Shackleton's leadership and courage, the determination of the crew, and their unbreakable teamwork. Friends, 106 years after this incident, in 2022, investigators were doing some research in the sea. Then, in the Weddell Sea, 10,000 feet below the surface, they found Shackleton's ship, Endurance. The state of preservation is just absolutely brilliant. There are no wood-consuming marine parasites in the Weddell Sea. It's truly amazing that it took us 106 years to find the wreckage of this ship. And even after 106 years, since it sunk so close to Antarctica, it is in remarkably good condition. You can see the latest photos of this ship on the screen. These were taken a few years ago. And today, if you ever go to South Georgia Island, you will find Shackleton's grave there. He set out to accomplish a historic feat to be the first man to walk across Antarctica. Although his original plan failed, he did something even more miraculous. Much more amazing. Friends, if you like this survival story, then an equally amazing survival story is of the survivors of Flight 571. Another story that tells you that if you have determination, courage, and a strong will, you can make the impossible possible. The link to join Dinah's Mind-Body Fitness Masterclass on Adaria is given in the description below. And you can click here to learn more about the survivors of Flight 571. Thank you very much.